Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to the October session of the From the Bench Virtual Studio Tour Series. My name is Sarah Songer, and I'm the Program and Studio Manager at San Francisco Center for the Book. And this month, we're happy to welcome Servane Briand as our guest artist. Born and raised in France, Servane came to California as a young adult. She worked in high tech, journalism, video game localization, consulting, and lots of freelance translation when her kids were growing up. She always had one foot in science and one in the humanities, from Greek and Latin to math and physics. In 2006, she took an art workshop which changed her life. She studied printmaking, book arts, and fine binding, encountering extraordinary teachers and mentors along the way. Her books are often one of a kind or small editions, and she particularly enjoys making books in boxes. Her work has been exhibited in the US, Canada, and Europe, and is held in various public and private collections. So, Servane, thank you so much, and I'll spotlight you, and away you go.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, the Center for the Book, for the invite, and thank you, everyone, for taking the time to be on Zoom today. So I figured I would tell you briefly how I got into book arts, show you the place where I work, since the series is From the Bench, then tell you about a few projects and processes behind them, then talk a bit more about the Babel project on language and translation, which is taking more and more of my time in the studio. So let me share the screen. Is that good? So first, how did I get into book arts? Like Sarah said, in 2006, I took a workshop and liked it so much that I went on studying printmaking, then book arts, first at the Pacific Art League, then Foothill College, lots of classes with Kent Mansky, then fine binding with Eleanor Ramsey in San Francisco, and many workshops in the US and in Europe, including a bunch at the Center for the Book. So this is my bench in the studio that I share with two artist friends, Paloma and Atina. It was not always that nice. I first worked in our bedroom. I have a very patient husband. I did that for 8 years. Then I got a great studio in Palo Alto with Paloma through the Coverly Artist program from 2014 to 2022. Then Paloma and I found this place in San Francisco about 2 years ago. And she did this From the Bench video about a year ago. So check it if you haven't seen it yet. Instead of making you nauseous, I felt like I would, instead of working with my laptop, I would share a brief video of the studio. So that's my bench that you just saw with a lot of light. That's the entrance to the studio, flat files, the guillotine, lots of storage on both sides of the studio in transparent boxes to find what we need. We have a couple of cutters, tables that we can adjust in height, which is very convenient, the etching press, more tools, the little kitchen where we can do screen printing, and more flat files. So as you see, it's a fantastic space. We are very lucky, and it's a building with other artists, which also makes it super nice. So why book art? I love book, I love reading, but that's not enough. Book arts draw from many disciplines. You can come to the field from printmaking, papermaking, fine binding, fiber art, literature, drawing, painting, photography, calligraphy, etc. So that allows for a very creative field and constant innovation, a place for sharing ideas and techniques. And the making aspect is very important. So here you can see two prints made from photopolymer plates, exposed in the sun. They are solar plates, and they are printed as sheen collé. So plus beeswax for transparency, which you'll see is recurrent in my work. It's another aspect of book arts that I'm really interested in is that it involves nearly all senses. So you have vision, of course, but also hearing, the music of paper when, especially with handmade paper, when it's crisp, it makes this lovely sound when you turn the pages or fold it. Then you have touch, because artist books need to be touched and manipulated. And then smell. I use a lot of beeswax and organic dyes, and you get that through a lot of my work. I also think that artist books force us to read differently, and that, if nothing else, makes them interesting. On the right is an altered book project called Luminous Cranes that is now in the collection of UNT in Dallas. I deconstructed an old Biblia Sacra and made origami cranes from the book and prints from the original text. And that was transformed into boxes, and all is painted with beeswax. Another print technique I really enjoy is monoprint. On the left is a print on memory, and on the right is a book called Work in Progress, which is very autobiographical, and it's composed of 50 monoprints. I'll show you a video on the book. So there is also box making, of course, in my work. The binding is the cross structure invented by Carmencio Arregui. The covers are made of parchment, pergamena parchment, and the book draws from photography, drawing, digital printing. Each monoprint is a single sheet, so they are mounted on stubs, and I have hand-dyed the stubs to get the colors I wanted. And the colors in the print come from watercolor, etching ink as they go through the press with the silhouette stencil and encaustic paints. And it's it's a pretty long book, so I won't show you the entire book, but you see a lot of the processes I use in the work, and I have written text also in that book. Another printing technique, screen printing, is pretty big in our studio. To the right is a print called Nord Perdu, which was inspired by Nancy Houston's book that talks of living between languages and cultures. To the left is another print with 8 or 9 layers called Tus Italia. And on top, you can see 2 book projects. There are boxes covered with book cloth, and here is the project I will talk about a bit later, where you have icons and the titles printed on the boxes. So Book of Bones is another project from 2013, but it represents quite well the way I approach a project. So that's why I figured I would talk about it. This one started in Paris at the Galerie de l'Évolution at the Museum of Natural History. They have an impressive collection of skeletons, which I photographed. Then back in California, I researched the topic of bones. I wrote a story. Part of it is hidden on purpose, as if I had taken away the flesh of the story and left only the remaining bones. Then I illustrated the book with photos and drawings and made it into a small edition. And there are only 3. So the first 2 I made into a very simple binding. It's Coptic stitch, and they are housed in a box that closes with magnets. And by that time, I had started studying fine binding with Eleanor Ramsey. So that's my first full leather binding, which I did with Eleanor. That's why it's so beautiful. You can see details of the book with the headbands. Because I printed the book on heavy watercolor paper, it was not really done for a fine binding, but I mounted the pages on stubs, as you can see here. And then I made leather doublure, the suede fly leaves. And then I used the laser to etch for the cover, the spine, and the box. And that was a bit experimental because laser was not as popular as it is now. So I did a bunch of tests and before etching the finished book, which was a scary experiment. So I make a lot of books in boxes in various geometrical shapes. This one is called Bicycles from a Chain. From about 10 years ago, when I was a bit obsessed with round books. For this one, I made round sheets of paper from abaca pulp. Then I created the illustrations for the book from a series of photos I had taken over the years. So each sheet of paper is printed digitally, then painted with beeswax for transparency and added structure. And then I created this binding with rivets and made the round box. So it's an edition of 3. And I made 2 more books with the same structure, one on time and one as a photo album for a friend. I'll show you a little video. So the book is in a round box. Of course, the title is a word, is a joke on the bicycle chain. The text I wrote is partly in French, partly in English. And you have to imagine the smell of beeswax. This book smells really good. So that's the text on the bicycles. And you can probably hear the sound that the pages make as they are manipulated. The book is actually pretty, it takes a lot of space. And with the beeswax, you get the transparency. So it's really nice to see it in front of a window. And I have also shown it exhibiting Japanese pins on the wall. And I'm very happy that one of them is in Jack Ginsberg collection in South Africa. So all the photos were photos I took over the years of bicycles. So more of the round books I made during that period. This time I used AP prints and reject prints, cut them into round shapes, then painted them with encaustic paint, and then used the same rivet binding and made boxes for them. There's a box with book cloth and then a box here with full leather and onlays. And I used the same technique for another one called Un air de famille, family resemblance. So this time it's an unusual photo album. Since both my husband and I have an interesting collection of photos going back to our great-grandparents, I thought it would be fun to do that for our kids. So each of them got a black and a white book. Then there are two XY books for Emmanuel's side of the family and two XX on my side. And the question mark, I can talk about it later. And then I also included text that was inspired by the ancestry data we obtained from through 23andMe. So there is also a text on genetics. And the book is now in the collection of the University of Colorado in Denver. I'm not sure my great-grandmother would be very happy about that, but that's life. More books in boxes. So this one, Lampreys, is a collaboration with my son Samuel. He wrote a poem that narrates the unfortunate adventures of a rat named Lampreys. The book is a small edition varié of 7. The first two are 3-sided pyramid boxes. This one is covered with leather, which has been laser etched with some gold tooling. And the text is written on Japanese paper, which is stenciled with color inks on the sides and painted with beeswax. And then the origami rat figure was invented by French artist Éric Joisel, who was a master of wet folding. Then Samuel decided that he wanted to show the pattern of the origami rat. So we decided the pyramid should have 4 sides to accommodate for the square pattern that you can see here on the base of the pyramid. And all the pyramid attached with magnets. But then we took it a step further. And decided to add lights that would illuminate the pattern and further illustrate the struggles of Lampreys. So for that, we collaborated with my friend Nick, who is a photonics engineer, and he designed a very clever structure. I'm going to show you the video of the Lampreys, the rat. So as you can see, the pyramid is on a base. And that's the structure that Nick designed with 2 very thin components so that the power is delivered through the base wirelessly and without batteries, which would, endanger the longevity of the book. So there is a receiver plate with LED in the pyramid and then the transmitter plate in the base. And as the rat struggles and get weaker and weaker, the light decreases in intensity and switch off. And then the cycle starts again. And in addition, the light dimming can be programmed to match one's own reading of the poem. So it can be adjusted to the reader. And that's wood veneer, which has been also laser etched. The pyramid for those 2 are leather and wood veneer covered. So to the left is my friend Nick, who also collaborated on the other project, La Prose du Transsibérien, Kitty Marriott's wonderful recreation of the iconic book by Blaise Cendrars and Sonia Delaunay. I love this book, so it was fantastic to participate in the project. The original was made in Paris in 1913. Paris is the city of lights, and electricity was starting to spread in Europe. So Nick and I decided to add light to La Prose. So you can see the LED plate on the bottom left, which is in the covers of the book. And here are a few details of the binding. I abstracted the path for the imaginary voyage the narrator takes between Moscow and Karbin, and that became the recurrent motif in the binding. On the cover, the end sheets, there is embroidery on the leather, and then you can see the series of train stations, which are laser etched on the wood veneer, and they lit in succession as the train progresses. And the speed can also be adjusted to one on rhythm of the poem. So more books in boxes. Threads of Life is a work I did in 2022. It's in 2 exhibits currently, and I will be speaking of it in 2 weeks for the Book Arts Alliance in Georgia. So tune in if you are interested, and I'll be brief for that one. So in short, the book represents the 3 fates of the Greek mythology, hence a metaphor for life. Clotho, the first one, spins the thread, Lachesis, the second one, measures, and Atropos, the third one, cuts the thread. So each character opens up with a series of 6 drawers, and each character tells a different story. The first one, Clotho, narrates the evolution of life on Earth. The second one talks about Homo sapiens with the 23 human chromosomes. And the third one tells the history of communications dedicated to Samuel Morse with the threads that connect us. And you can read the book horizontally or vertically. So to the left is a detail. It's the book for Clotho, going from the earliest forms of life to more complex forms like the little hedgehog you can see here. The book is drawn on one side and digitally printed on the other side with beeswax. And it's a boustrophedon structure. So it's one single page which has been cut into this hexagonal accordion. And to the right, you can go from the bottom drawer where you have little threads of DNA, then a single cell, a tessellation representing a more complex form of life, some weavings, and then the sketchbook that details some of the research that went into that book. And then that's the book for Atropos with the Morse code that writes the names of the 3 fates. Another recent project called Hinc Adoram is on the topic of repetition and transformation. I gave a talk about it last year at the Book Arts Alliance, so you can find more information on the book. But briefly, Right is a poem by Greek contemporary poet Thanasis Atsopoulos called Repetition as a Form of Life. The book started with a workshop on Zen Shanbao with Paula Berger-Krill and Susan Scher. It's inspired by Ovid's Metamorphoses. And it once again combines multiple techniques. I wrote excerpt of the text on paper, on hanji, in yellow ink. Then I made paper thread, or kigami, a technique I learned at PBI with Velma Boyard. Then I wove it into small squares. Let me show you. Here you see the tessellations made from handmade hand-dyed paper. And here are the little squares of shifu, or actually moro jifu. The dots are the yellow ink I used to write the text. And they're all enclosed in these little flower top boxes. And to the right is the bottom box, which is made of a botanical print backed up with hanji. So I started doing work on botanical print with a friend in Brittany about 2 years ago. She's a botanist and an expert on printing with plants and fabric. So we started experimenting on paper together, especially Japanese, Korean, and Vietnamese paper. And we have an ongoing collaboration. And that has led me to explore, do more book structures. On the left are part of a series called Botanicos, where I mix handmade paper, hand-dyed paper, and botanical prints. And then I made a felt cover for these books. And to the right is a star book with botanical prints on paper, on linen. The papers are hand-dyed, painted, and paste paper. And the covers of the book are leather. And then there's a box. So now onto Babel, the larger ongoing project in my studio practice. So I have always been interested in language and translation. You saw earlier the print of Nord Perdu, inspired by Nancy Houston. In 2014, my friend Karen and I collaborated on a book that plays with what happens with the literal translation of idioms. So we had fun with the weird results and illustrated the book with watercolor and collages in a sort of Dada absurdist approach. Then in 2019, I read George Steiner After Babel, and I love his idea that translation is constantly happening, and his idea that this happens in the space between two idiolects. So that led me to start the Babel project. So I asked my son Samuel whether he could write a story inspired by the myth of Babel that could become a book within a tower. He ended up writing 12 stories, and the book is Arise by Any Other Name that you can see here at Codex. That was in 2022. The book is pretty tall. It's about 1 meter tall. And I have a little video to show you how it works. The tower is articulated, and the panels are covered with hand-dyed cave paper. The book the binding is simple. It's a simple cupcake stitch. And I have added a magnet so that the book can be attached to a metal stand for more stability when it's standing up. Because it's so tall and such a weird shape, I also, the font increases as you go down in the text. The book is, you can see icons, which I will talk about a bit more later. And the book is digitally printed. And there are some hand drawings also. So we won't see the whole book because we have more to cover. But that's Arise by Any Other Name. Then I was, as I continued learning about translation, which is an exploding field of research, I read 12 brilliant essays by Guillaume Métayer, who is a French researcher, poet, and translator. I met him in Paris, and he agreed to collaborate on book number 2 called A comme Babel. So I translated his essays and made book number 2, which was shown at Codex in 2024. And then there will be a third and final book in this Passages of Babel series. For the third one, I'm collaborating with 12 poets translators, and each of them is contributing a text inspired by one word of the Dictionary of the Untranslatables, itself a huge project with 150 philosophers in Europe, which was led by Barbara Cassin. So behind all the work is research. So I'm showing the stacks at the Green Library at Stanford, where I spend a lot of time. One of my favorite libraries in Mexico, the Biblioteca Vasconcelos, which inspired one of my drawing in Babel book number 2, and the Dictionnaire des Philosophies, which is inspiring Babel number 3. So Passages of Babel is one of a kind, and we wanted to make it available to a larger audience. So Samuel and I teamed with Patrick Fenton, a printer and designer, to continue the original project. So the three of us at Codex, Patrick, Samuel, and myself, with the box, with the 12 booklets for Babel. To the right is Patrick in his studio with the letterpress cover for booklet number 4. The process is that we meet every week to work on idea, design, and that's how we've been doing it since 2022. We have now completed 8 booklets, and we are currently working on number 9 and number 10. The booklets are letterpress printed on the cover, and it's risograph on the inside. So we have the same format for each booklet, but of course, variations and details for each one. In addition to the story, Samuel's story, we have a few quotes, and we have detailed elements which are not in the original book. Like here, we have a psychotropic designer's molecule, which exists only for us. Because the birds were, doing drugs in the story. And then we have for story number 4, which takes place in a fire extinguisher factory, we got inspired by Russian futurism. So we added a word grid of Klebnikov's famous poem on laughter with all his invented words. And I got great help from my friend Joanna and Alain for that, for the Russian and the coding of the word grid. It was a challenge. So story number 5, the sleepwalkers all converge on a central point. So the story is inspired by the science of vector fields. So Samuel wrote code to generate random vector field functions. Then we picked one of them, and that's the image we use for that booklet. And so the story reads from the front cover to the middle spread, and then from the back cover to the middle spread, to the converging point. Here you can see on top, it's pretty hard to decipher, but it's the function that we Samuel generated and we chose for that booklet. You can see some details on the bottom left with the black arrows converging on a central point. And that's the result rendition with the little blue arrows and the red functions. So here you can see to the right, that's our little icon for the story. So all the sleepwalkers are converging to that point. Story number 7 is partly inspired by 2 paintings by Diebenkorn on coffee. So Samuel wrote 2 ekphrastic poems, which are letterpress printed. So the right image, here they are, and the text is aligned and justified to frame the poem, which addresses the paintings of the story. And the color images, of course, recall the Ocean Park series by Diebenkorn. Oh, and yes, so from the cover to the icon, there is always a connection. See, from the front, you go to the little icon. So that's story number 7. And for each booklet, we have a unique QR code. So when we finish designing, printing, and delivering the booklets to our collectors, we make the stories available to everyone on a website that is dedicated to the project. And this is the URL for the website, and you're all welcome to read the first 8 stories. And I think I'll finish here and open up to questions.
Servane, thank you so much. I want to read a comment from Gail during the presentation. She wrote, "This is also fantastic. I can hardly stand it and I can't keep up. Will there be a recording?" And I second that. Your work is just stunning. The technical perfection aside, because of course you are an Eleanor student, but just the breadth of techniques and inspiration is really astonishing. Thank you for sharing your work with us.
Thank you so much.
Oh, this is also from Gail. Actually, she was referring back to the rat prints. She's curious about the magnets, and that's a fascinating.
So the magnets, again, I have to thank Eleanor because I started with her, and she has the.
You froze. Your audio's not coming through, Servane. So let's just give it a check. Let's try it again. Can we hear you?
Can you hear me?
There you are. Great.
Okay,
let's start again with the magnets.
Okay, so the magnets, I learned from Eleanor how to use, magnets really well, and they are hidden in the sides of the pyramid. You have to do a lot of trials to make sure that you have the exact amount of power you need with all the covering materials. So it takes some experimental for each project, but I've used magnets a lot. It's such an elegant way to to close boxes, to attach elements. I have them in most of my work when necessary.
Yeah. You said you would mention the question mark book later. You would talk about that.
Oh, the question, it's because the book is like a tic-tac-toe book, so it could have been there could have been an empty space, but dogs play a very important part in my life, and in my kids' life. So that's the dogs. Going back to my great-grandparents, I have photos of dogs from Brittany.
Oh, wow. Long family history. I was particularly struck by your studio space. Do you teach or do any?
So Paloma and I did a few workshops back when we were at Cubberley, mostly for friends and people who came to open studio and who were interested. We are open to doing it again. It's just we get generally, life takes on, and I'm always late on projects. But I'm open to teaching, and the space is great, and we could definitely do that. And again, we're in a building with 12 or 13 other artists. So there is a community here, which makes it really interesting.
Yeah. Sorry, I can answer that question myself. I'm curious, so when you showed that leather binding that you did with Eleanor, you lasered the finished book?
Yes, yes. The book was completely finished, all beautiful because, you know, Eleanor was on my shoulder for most of the process, and I did a lot of errors that she helped me, you know, correct. So I learned so much with that book. But the book was completely finished, and yes, I put it under the laser. There was a maker space at Coverly with high school students, and they were kind enough to work with an older lady. So we collaborated on that. He signed the book, actually. He was, but because we did so many tests for with, you know, board. So he was, yeah, but he worked.
That's amazing. I love that you collaborated with the high school students at least. Hasmik, do you have a question? You can unmute yourself.
Well, just a little comment and a question. The comment is, I'm also very impressed by what inspires you to do a book, the topics that you choose. And the one, of course, of great interest to me was the last one. As you know, I'm a linguist. And, you know, this whole idea of idioms having pictures or not having pictures is a very interesting topic. And I would love to just have a chat with you about that and the possibilities of further books in the future, not just the sort of the original translation from the, you know, but there's an enormous amount of literature in cognitive psychology about this mental images versus words and how they connect to each other, etc. I would love to talk to you about it, but the last one you showed me made me jump out of my chair. I mean, I love your work, but that one was something else.
That's actually very interesting, and thank you. When I talked to Barbara Cassin, who led this remarkable project for the Dictionary of the Untranslatables, she was actually interested in the artist book because you could, you have the visual element. So you have, you know, the dictionary, every word has been studied and translated. I mean, there is an entry for every word written by all this group of philosophers, and the dictionary itself has been translated into 20 languages. But you can bring in the visual in the artist book. You can bring the different alphabets. You can bring the visuals. So it's all very interesting. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Lots of potential there. Yeah.
Let's talk.
Yes, let's talk, please. Yeah, let's talk.
Wonderful. Well, we are just about at time. So if there aren't any other questions for Servane, we'll wrap it up for the day. Thank you all so much for coming. We'll meet again next month. I believe it's Thursday, November 7th. Our guest will be artist and teacher Steph Kudish, based in Oakland. That'll be posted on our website and announced in the newsletter with a registration link soon. So thank you all again, and I hope we see you again. Thank you so much, Servane, for taking the time, and that was incredible.
Thank you, Sarah.